Hi guys, my name is Ivo and I'm from mytestedesp.net. It's time for part 3 of my current video series about writing clean and testable C# code. Now let's jump to Visual Studio and take a moment to remember what we covered in my previous video, and that was that the new keyword is bad, it's a code smell, and you need to refactor it if you are using it. You need to replace the new keyword because it creates a fixable dependencies to a something more replaceable like inversion of control or dependency injection like here. Okay, the next kind of dependencies we may have uh, in our project is static classes. If I go to the user's controller and let's decide to test change profile picture method here in the user's controller. So I'm going to create user's controller test class. I'm going to reference using xUnit and I'm going to say public class. Cool, great. So let's start testing this method. When I pass a no picture URL, this method should return bad request. Essentially, that's a method which changes a profile picture. The logic is simple. It receives a picture URL. It uses an image service static class which updates a picture. We don't care about the logic here, but it has a static method update picture, and it updates the picture and then returns OK. We only want to test the logic here. We're creating unit tests, so we only want to validate that this method is essentially working correctly. So to validate this test, this method with a unit test, just a side note, if you want to validate the whole method, even with the logic of the image service here, you need to use integration tests. If you want me to cover integration tests in another video, let me down below in the comments. Okay, so with the unit test, we need to test and assert only this logic here. Let's start. If I pass a no picture URL, I'm going to receive a bad request with some error. Let's assert that. Fact public void no picture URL should return bad request. Arrange var users controller equals new users controller act var result equals users controller dot change profile picture no. Since it's an awaitable method, we need to change how we invoke it. And lastly, we need to assert that var bad request result is assert of is type bad request object result. It's bad request object result because if I see what this method returns, it's essentially a bad request object result, so I'm going to use it. A bad request object result in terms of ASP.NET Core means that this bad request contains some sort of object with additional data. Currently in this method is that the image cannot be empty. Then I need to assert that I want that message here bad request object result. The value is that string. I'm not sure whether this will work right away because the value is of type object and we will need to cast it first, but let's try it. Let's see what fails here. Okay, it's fine because this value here, this object is essentially the string, and the equal method compares them directly and knows how to convert from object to string. Great, that's fine. Cool. We tested the first logic. Now we need to test the second one, if the picture URL is correct. Okay, but we have a dependency here, and the dependency is the image service. The image service is a static class, so I cannot replace it. And if I take a look at the logic here in the update image, it uses web servers, it uses the internet, it uses image load, so it tries to load an image from a destination, and uses the image is a third-party library, image sharp, and it uses the file system. This static class alone has three dependencies in this single method: the webquant, the third-party library, and the file system. And if we don't change the image service, we essentially cannot test that. We cannot test it because these dependencies are preventing me to have tests in an isolated environment. I need to have internet, I need to have proper images on my hard drive, and I need to have a valid file system. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to make that image service here replaceable. To make it replaceable, I'm going to use the same concept I used here. I'm going to use an abstraction. But how to do an abstraction, how to use an interface with static class? You cannot. And that's the whole point here. Don't use static classes. Don't use them. Use them only if they don't need any dependencies and they have pure functions, pure input and pure output. For example, if you have a static class like public static int sum, int x, int y, which returns x plus y, that's completely fine. There's no dependency here in this static method. It's fine. But with this one, with this static method here, we don't have any other choice but to remove the static. So essentially, static is evil and try to avoid it. Try to use instance classes and use interfaces. That's a very important rule if you want to have testable code. So let's refactor this. To refactor the code, I need to make the image service non-static anymore. I have another private method here, calculate optimal size. I'm going to leave it like that for now because I don't care about it. It's used by this one here. It's fine for now. It's not needed for the test, so I'm not going to refactor it. So what I did, I made the image service a normal class which is not static, and the update image also a normal method which is not static. So now I need to create an instance. If you remember my previous video, the instance should have an abstraction. So first, let's create an abstraction. I'm going to create a new interface called iMageService, and I'm going to provide the following contract: update image. Then I'm going to make the image service implement this interface, and I'm going to make the user's controller using the image controller using private read-only the abstraction image service, and I'm going to say this dot image service like this. So essentially I'm allowing this controller to use an abstraction which is replaceable. The static class was not replaceable, and that's the whole idea here. And this way I made the user's controller testable, at least this method. Okay, public user's controller. If you remember, we make the dependencies come from the constructor. So instead of using the new keyword and repeating the same mistake we fixed earlier in the home controller, instead of doing that, because essentially I'm not creating a replaceable abstraction and replaceable dependency here, I'm just creating the same mistake I had with the static class. Okay, so currently I made this method testable, and I made the iImage service more abstract. In order to make it work in the ASP.NET Core framework itself, I need to register it. So I'm going to add iImage service here like that. All inversion of control containers allow you to specify such bindings. They give you an option to say every time somebody asks for this interface, give him this specific implementation. And this is how our user's controller continues to work correctly, but it's now testable. So what we need to do now is we need to fix our previous tests, which don't require the dependency to pass, so I'm not going to pass it. And we need to write the second test. But first, let me show you where to find the source code I'm using here. It's available in my GitHub. It's Ivailo Kenov. Hit repositories, write TV here. And in this repository, I'm uploading all the source code I'm using in this channel. So you can download it, you can play with it, you can take a look at it. Essentially, you can do whatever you like. I will be very happy if you give me a star here. And if you want, you can watch the repository because I'm linking videos and source code here earlier than when the videos are becoming public on YouTube. So you may get these videos a little bit early. I'm going to use the moment to thank my sponsors. That's Bellatrix, Resharper, Softuni, Smart IT, Noble Hire, and 1-Bit Software. Thank you guys. You truly rock, and I hope you will continue to support this channel for many, many years. If somebody wants to support this channel or wants to support my projects, you can do it by going to my other repositories, and I'm accepting backers or sponsors on Patreon and Open Collective. I also accept one-time donations via PayPal. I will be extremely thankful, guys. Okay, let's continue to Visual Studio and let's write down our last test for this video. Public async task. Change profile picture with no picture. This is a better name, yeah. Change profile picture with non-no picture URL should return OK. So first we need a fake. We need a fake of the image service. So I'm going to create a new fake image service. Public was fake image service. Like I said previously, I'm not going to use a mocking framework. I'm going to create all my fake classes by hand, just to not make the tutorial overcomplicated. I want to focus on the clean code design part and focus how it's going to become testable when we refactor it. If you want me to make a video about mocking, let me know down below in the comments. Okay, I image service, which essentially will not do anything. That's right. It will just return a completed task because I don't need this method to do anything. I want to test whether the result is okay. Okay, I may want to test that the user image destination is correct. Because the user image destination contains the user, which is another dependency. Okay, let's test that. Let's change it a bit. Let's go to the fake image service and say public string destination, like that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, okay, this dot destination equals destination. I'm going to say also that public string image URL should be here. But I'm going to make this private. I'm going to say public image URL equals image URL, and then I'm going to return the task like this, because I want to validate that the image URL and the destination which the controller passes to the service are correct. That's the whole idea here. Okay, anything else? I believe everything is fine now. First, I need to arrange the controller. We already know how to arrange a controller with a user because this controller has a user here. And it was not the best code to write. So I'm going to make, yeah, okay, it will work if I just copy paste everything and say, cool, use user's controller here. That's kind of okay, but what I want to do is I want to extract this code because I'm doing copy paste here, and that's a bad practice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an extensions folder. I'm going to create controller extensions class. I'm going to name it controller test extensions because I'm going to use these extensions only in my tests. So public static void with test user, like this. And I'm going to say that I want a controller class here, and I'm going to set that logic. I'm going to say that controller.controller context equals this logic here, add everything, and the username will be a public const string. I'm going to introduce a new class, test constants. Test constants which contain public const string test username, like this. Test contents, test username. Cool, now let's use that in our I'm going to enhance it a little bit. I'm going to make that generic. I'm going to say return the controller, pass it like this, and make the controller like that, and then return the controller here. I'm making this only because I want to make the code chainable. I don't want to do the following: home controller dot with test user, like that. I want to make it chainable, and I need it to use a generic for this one because I wanted to have the home controller type returned here so that I can call privacy directly. Okay, so home controller with test user, and I need to make the same thing here with the user's controller. So I'm going to write var users controller equals new users controller. I need to pass a fake image service. So var image service equals new fake image service. Here it is. And I'm going to say with test user, like that. So essentially I arrange the controller with the fake image service and the fake user. Then I need to act. Var result equals users controller dot change profile picture with some picture URL. The picture URL, I'm going to, I don't need the test username here. The picture URL should be some fake picture URL, const string picture URL equals some picture URL. Let's create a test to follow our convention. And because this is awaitable, I need to await it. Cool. Then what I need to do, I need to assert the result. First, I need to assert that the user's controller is passing the correct user image, the correct picture URL and the correct user image destination. So first, the picture URL. Assert equal, I expect the picture URL to be set in the image service image URL. Then I expect the following with the test constants test username to be image service destination. Because essentially that's the logic. I'm formatting the following with the current username, and the current username is the test username, so these two should work. Let's run that and see whether it's working correctly. It's running fine. Great. So the last thing we need to do is we need to validate whether the result is OK result. And that's it. So assert is type OK result, the result. Great. Let's run all tests because we made some refactorings to see whether we broke something. Everything runs fine, and that's it, guys. We learned that static classes are bad for testability. Static methods too, of course. So don't use them, try to avoid them, and use static classes only for pure functions. If you don't know what a pure function is, just Google it, it's easy. It's a function which don't have any dependencies and returns the same output for the same input every single time, no matter what. So we learned how to extract static classes into interfaces and make them more abstract. And in this way we created a testable controller. That's a huge rule. No static methods, no static logic. Extract it and create abstractions, because static classes are fixed dependency which cannot be replaced, and that's a problem with testability. Now some of you may ask, what about third-party libraries that are using static classes and methods? Well, wrap them on a wrapper class and add an interface for that class. I'm going to cover that situation in one on my next videos from this video series. So you're going to see that situation. We're going to fix that. We're going to replace the file system with an interface, but the file system is third party, so I cannot change it directly. But we will do that, don't worry. Okay, thank you guys for now, and see you in the next video, in which we're going to cover private methods and how to test them.